All right, Kiss Army, welcome to the KissFAQ Podcast. Thank you for giving us your time today and letting us into your head. I hope we don't do any damage. This is a Kiss-related podcast by the board, for the board. We hope that you enjoy.
Hello and welcome to episode 260 of the KissFAQ Podcast. I'm Daniel from Sweden. We's on the KissFAQ message board. Joining me today are two gentlemen one from America and one from Canada.
Yes.
First to Mark Almighty on the message board. Mark from Canada, hello.
Greetings, Daniel. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm fine. And we also have St. Louis Kiss.
Hello again, everybody.
Lonnie, yeah. I guess you're from St. Louis.
I am.
Yeah. Congratulations on the cup. Okay. First of all, I would like to say thank you to Antti Miettunen. Sounds kind of Finnish, because he commented on a previous episode on YouTube and liked the casual feel. So that's what gave us the idea to this one. You know, we read all comments, and most of them are kind of valuable to us. And of course, we like to discuss Kiss in any shape or form. So please do continue to give us your comments. So aside from Kiss, this will be an episode focusing on you guys, my fellow KissFAQ podcasters. We're going to get to know you a little bit better, since we're going to talk a little bit about your guilty pleasures when it comes to music. We'll get a sneak peek at your playlists. And today will be your chance to know a bit more about these veteran podcasters. Do you know how long we've been doing this?
2015, like January of 15, I think.
Exactly.
Wow.
Aha.
Very
Very good.
Very good. 5 years coming up. So
Unbelievable.
we're kind of veterans. Furthermore, we can all agree that we're Kiss fans, Kiss nerds. But today, we're actually going to find out some more nerdy interests from these guys. And another subject we will talk about is Kiss fans. Since some Kiss fans has done a bit more for Kiss and the Kiss Army than others. And today you guys will tell us about a special Kiss fan that has meant something special to you, or just a fan that you think is worth praising. We're also going to discuss what other podcasts we're listening to. But we should start off with a genuine Kiss topic. Usually we start with if you have bought anything, but Ken isn't with us. But he always buys stuff.
He always has something new.
Albums and everything. But you guys, have you bought anything lately, or?
I haven't bought anything recently. My brother did bring me back a shirt from the Manchester show that he saw a couple weeks ago when he was over there. So I haven't specifically bought anything, but I got a Kiss gift, I guess. Oh, and Joe Adele gave me the Gene Simmons cereal last week. So
nice.
Have you tasted it?
Is it good?
I have not. No, have I opened it? Are you crazy? No, I haven't opened it and eaten it. No, God, no.
It'll burn.
It's yours.
I don't think you will make a lot of money from that one. Saving that one, but we'll see. But any Kiss news that you've come? We should actually say that Julian is in Nashville. He's going to be at the Nashville Rock N Pod on Saturday, and he will actually interview a bunch of people. And the name that stood out to me was the producer of Carnival of Souls, Toby Wright. Mm-hmm. So I guess if you have a good question or an idea that you want Julian to present to that guy, you could just write it in the comment section, and maybe your question will be asked to Toby Wright. I don't know. Did you see the list of names? Any others that we should mention that Julian will talk to?
I can't think of any offhand. I know I saw the list, but I can't remember the names of the people that were on there. But I know he's also doing he's doing a forum, like an actual like segment at the Rock N Pod where he's talking to some of the guys in Ace Frehley's band there, talking about being fans to famous, where they became, just regular Kiss fans, and then they ended up, now playing for Ace Frehley and Gene Simmons. So that should be an interesting sort of seminar to go and check out, right?
Yeah, but if you're in the Nashville area this weekend, the Rock N Pod Expo is Saturday, and it will feature members of Saigon Kick, Stryper, TNT, Megadeth, Kix, Danzig, Tora Tora, Green Jello, Exodus, Toby Wright, as previously mentioned, and many more. It's on Saturday, August 10th at the Nashville Airport Marriott.
Yes, Michael Sweet, though. That's the one thing that kind of stuck out. I'm kind of disappointed I wasn't able to go this year because I was a huge Stryper fan when I was younger. Man, Soldiers Under Command was one of my favorite records, and they're actually doing, I think, an album thing with the Decibel Geek guys where they're talking about that whole album in detail with Michael Sweet. So I can't wait to hear that.
Cool. Anything else in the Kiss world?
They started the North American tour. First date of the North American tour was in Florida just the other day. And the interesting thing, I guess, about that is the same set list as Europe. They kept Crazy Nights in the set list upon their return to America. So I thought that was interesting. I halfway expected them to swap it back to Do You Love Me or switch it up to something else. So I was surprised and a little bit impressed that they kept Crazy Nights in the set list.
There's also a couple of other interesting things that Jean Beauvoir was there backstage hanging out with them, the guy who co-wrote a few Kiss classics with them. And it's interesting, though, too, that there was a discussion about some people were mentioning if they had scaled down the stage now compared to how it was, because apparently in Europe their stage show was a little bit smaller than the one that they did here in North America. And people are thinking that they might have kept the smaller stage and brought it back to America now. I don't know if that's true or not, but I'd love to hear people's comments about that.
I would imagine it's probably true with the number of sheds that they're going to be doing in North America, that it will be a scaled back version, not the same version that we got in the arenas in January, February, and March. So
yeah, I think you're right.
Time will tell. We'll see.
Okay, let's move on to the next topic. I'm sure you guys and the listeners have been thinking about this one. It's often difficult to look into the future when you talk about Kiss. I mean, they've surprised us so many times and found ways to keep their popularity or get their popularity back, so to speak. I wonder, what are your future hopes regarding Kiss? I mean, after the tour ends, what are your hopes? What are you hoping for? Let's start with you, Lonnie.
Well, I can see the tour right now has dates through December, leaving the only part of the world they haven't gone to is South America, which I've heard rumors of them going to South America in the spring, but we'll see what happens. Where do they go? Where do they go after South America? Do they go back to Europe for another run? They've already, at that point, they will have already done 2 runs through the United States. Do they have enough to do another leg through the United States? I don't know. You'd have to at least wait a while before you could do another run through the United States, because by that time they will have played all the major markets, some secondary markets. I guess there's some secondary markets that they haven't hit. Like the tour they did in 2016 when they did a lot of secondary markets, but a lot of people that go to those secondary markets for shows also travel to those shows as well from the first market. So some of these people, if they've seen them, once over the winter, and if they see them again over the summer, are they going to travel to another show? I mean, some people will, the diehards will, but are you going to fill these places for a third leg in the United States? I don't know. Yeah. I really don't. As much as I love Kiss and I want to see them succeed, I don't know if they have the legs to do a third run through the United States so quickly.
You know what they can do?
Tell me.
Ace Frehley.
Ah, yes.
I think if the numbers starts to go down, they will consider that possibility.
You really think he's going to bring that many more people?
A few
I mean,
more.
he barely brings 1,000
Yeah,
into shows
but
that
it's
he does.
a different thing when he is in Kiss.
But it'd be a different element to get somebody to go back a third time to see him on this tour.
Yeah,
it would be a different element that
yeah.
And
I've
plus,
seen
a
him a
lot of
couple
these,
times already on this tour, but Ace is back. I could
Yeah,
pony up for
okay.
another show.
That's the hardcore people. That's the hardcore
Yeah.
people will go back.
Sure.
But the general population, when you say, "Oh, Ace is back," I mean, what do you mean? That space guy wasn't Ace? You know, like a lot of people
Sure.
don't even they did.
I'm with you. I've seen shows that people thought it was Ace Frehley.
Yeah, of course, but I think they'll try anything to, oh, you froze up there. Oh, you're back. Yeah. So I think they'll try anything to get some more people into the building towards the end. I mean, they have no shame whatever in their bodies. They can do whatever. But that's about the only thing I can think of. Maybe they can have Bruce Kulick on stage, but he doesn't pull a lot of numbers, no
Plus,
people go.
A non-makeup guy,
No,
I don't know.
No, so Ace is the only card they have to play, I think.
But so they are going to be playing obviously Japan, and have they already booked shows for Australia? Have they done Australia?
There's shows in Australia in November.
Okay, all right. Yeah, because I mean, where, like you said, where else in the globe have they not gone? I mean, do they go into any deeper places into Asia? Like, have they gone to like Korea or places like that to play, or, I mean, if they're really going at the end of this road, supposedly, then why don't they really try to go to a place like Moscow or places like that to play,
Well, they did Moscow on this tour.
Oh, they did, yeah, okay.
When they're in Europe, do they go to Guam? Do they do, some other places like that even? I don't know. Guns N' Roses hit a lot of countries in the Far East when they toured extensively. So did they go that route? I don't know. I guess it depends on if the demand is there or not, and how big the check is. It'll be. I don't know. I don't know where they go as far as touring for this end of the road tour, other than South America. Where else there really is to go? I mean,
well, of course they can do another run in Europe.
They could do another run in Europe. Maybe they headline Download Festival in England next summer. Yeah. Maybe that's a possibility.
The funny thing is, when I read this idea originally when we were talking about doing this episode, one of the things I was thinking about was I thought the question was asking what we would like them to do after they're done touring.
Okay. So
and what I thought was, I actually thought that one idea that I'd like to see them do is maybe try to do another, short run of residency at Las Vegas. I mean, I think that went over really well. They don't have to tour now, right? Because then they can just stay in one spot. They're stationary. All the touring stuff that can be a drag for them is not there when they do that. They seem to have enjoyed it somewhat. I know that won't help them with the 40 pounds of armor and stuff like that they wear on stage, but maybe that might be something to do, because it won't go against their, this is the last tour we're doing, because it's not a tour. It's just them doing a residency, right?
Don't give them any ideas.
Yeah, have you seen the Aerosmith residency? I mean, that Steven Tyler guy, it's like the best. He's awesome still, and he's like 70 years old. To me, I
haven't seen any of it.
You haven't. He's like, to me, it's like he is the best front man still.
He's still incredible.
Yeah, and sings very good to this day. Yeah.
Or I could see him doing a residency. After they do South America in the spring, maybe they do a residency. Maybe that's how they do some shows in Europe before they do the quote unquote final Kiss show. Maybe they do a month or two of just like a residency in Vegas, and maybe throw in something a little spicier to get people to travel out to Vegas to see them, that they're going to play, that they're going to mix it up a little bit and play some different type of songs.
I think they should. They should end things in Madison Square Garden.
I agree.
That should be the final spot, and do it like, I don't know if you saw Mötley Crüe's final show, like big thing, one last time in a famous arena. So, and I guess they would sell out Madison Square Garden. I think that if it's like advertised like the final show, they will sell out Madison Square Garden. No problem. But what if they entirely stop playing? I mean, you've done the residency, you played Madison Square Garden. What happens after that? What happens with the Kiss brand, Mark?
Well, honestly, I mean, it's the one thing that we've been talking about in a lot of episodes, and it's the one thing that I know we've had lots of debate about, is I really wish that they'd finally sit down, have a long discussion with Universal Music, and try to get parts of their catalog back, and really try to do some sort of proper big box set releases of some of these records. I mean, they're not going to make a new record. That we already know. So why not make like a box set version of Rock and Roll Over, where they give us, a remixed version maybe, or a remastered vinyl or something like that, plus some live, shows that they have from recorded back in the 70s and stuff like that. Include some 8x10s of some pictures from them back in the day. Like I said, my King Crimson collection is great. Like they do all those kinds of things, old ticket stubs and stuff like that, recreations of set lists. Like they can go really in depth, and Kiss has tons of history that they can go and mine and do it. But the problem is they never seem to sit down and pursue it, and if they're done touring and they don't have to worry about that end of it anymore, then maybe they have the time to do it.
What do you say, Lonnie?
I would enjoy that. But you see Metallica release these cool box sets. You see other bands release these cool, Def Leppard release these cool box sets. Why not Kiss? Why? And I know the reason why. It's because of their deal with Universal. But it's a shame that isn't taking place, because Kiss has just as many diehard fans as a Def Leppard does. They really do. Maybe not as much as a Metallica, but they do have a good hardcore base of diehard fans that would buy these deluxe box sets to celebrate those classic albums. I would like to see, there is more unreleased material out there too. I would like to see another box set of just unreleased Kiss material, and make it unreleased Kiss material, not like the box set we got back in 2001 that was majority studio recordings thrown in and some other stuff thrown in there. Outside of disc 1, it was mainly the first disc had a lot of good stuff on it, but then once you got past disc 1, it was mostly just studio recordings with some odds and ends thrown in there, just a sampler here and there. Yeah, do a good box set. And as much as it was touted as, the box set of all box sets, is the box set you've been waiting for. Like, well, I have all majority of this.
It was a big letdown.
It really was.
What I'm looking forward to, or what I'm hoping to get, is merchandise from every era of the band. I mean, they are so dissing the non-makeup years. I'd buy t-shirts and stuff from Lonnie. Imagine
couldn't agree more.
Different revenge t-shirts, and you
couldn't agree more. I love the non-makeup.
Yeah. So and they really haven't released anything what I can think of from that era. So there's a big opportunity there. I think people would buy a lot of stuff from a Lick It Up t-shirt or something from Animalize Asylum. I mean, just do it.
No, I agree. When I was a kid and they weren't wearing makeup, if you could get your hands on some merchandise of the band wearing makeup, that was really cool. Now it's the exact opposite. If you can get your hands on some non-makeup stuff, it's that's the rare stuff now, is the non-makeup stuff. And like you said, like, what have they done to celebrate, or what have they done to release that? What have they released to celebrate that era of the band? Well, the only thing they've ever released to celebrate that era of the band is like the 40th anniversary vinyls, which they kind of had to release to go along with everything else. It was kind of by default that they released that stuff. So it is a shame that they totally gloss over that era and act like it never even existed.
I mean, after they have stopped touring, there's like nothing to lose.
Why not?
There's really an opportunity to market that thing. Okay, let's leave Kiss for a while, and I hope you have looked at your Spotify or iTunes or whatever you use, because we're going to find out some of your guilty pleasures. I mean, we all know you as Kiss fans, and I know, Lonnie, you like Guns N' Roses, and Mark, you like Jess, and but that's not a big step away from Kiss. Are there any other type of music that you listen to that we could never have guessed you liked? Mark, Do you have anything?
Well, the interesting thing is that considering how much I despised this guy when I was younger, years
You're
later
not gonna
now.
talk about Bob Ezrin, are you?
No,
Okay.
not Bob Ezrin. Years later, as I got more involved in liking into the whole making of vinyl records and the whole production end of stuff, one guy who's really been at the forefront of trying to make vinyl the very best that it could sound is Neil Young. He's been really toting the whole vinyl resurgence and doing all kinds of interesting videos about how he's taking his catalog and making it sound fantastic for vinyl and for other digital mediums and stuff like that. And just watching some of these documentaries actually made me go out and buy a few of his vinyls, the new reissues, and the box set. I have a couple of those CD box sets of his past albums. And I'll be honest, the guy who I thought was absolutely horrendous when I was younger, I actually find myself taking a few of his CDs into the car with me now and listening to. I actually found myself a few times listening to Harvest, which I was like, wow, if my friends in my old band know that I was listening to Neil Young Harvest, they'd probably throw me out of the car, So that's one thing that's definitely something that's a guilty pleasure for me now, as far as that, because people who knew me always thought that I, was the guy who hated Neil Young. So that's definitely one of the things that I'm not too associated with. But I think the other thing that I'm starting to find myself listening to more is and this is maybe not so outrageous, but after my father passed away, I went through his vinyl collection just to help put some stuff away or give some of it to maybe some of his friends or stuff like that. And I started listening to a couple of them, and I found that I was liking some of his classical albums. Like he has a few really old pressings of like Brahms and Mozart and stuff like that. And, I was never really into that when I was younger. I was really like, whenever he would put it on the radio, I thought this was, the most boringest stuff ever. But, I took one of his pressings of Vivaldi, The Four Seasons, and I actually really like that now. And I actually have it in with my own collection. So I think that's another thing that a couple of my friends might go, huh? He's listening to classical music? Really? Like, it's just not something that was ever tied to me as a music listener.
Cool. So classical music and Neil Young. I didn't see that coming. Personally, I looked through my Spotify, and I found a few themes that I hadn't thought of it, but it seems like I enjoy, themes from old police and detective shows from the 80s. I guess it takes me back somehow, and it's kind of nostalgic because these days, at least here in Scandinavia, Nordic noir is very big, and that's like both in literature and music, stories that are dark and bleak, and the cops are very gloomy, melancholic, but the music I like is like the theme from Miami Vice.
I knew it.
Yeah, and that's like the opposite of Nordic noir. I mean, they had cool cars, they were fun, and their ways with women and so on. And other themes that I actually listen to a lot is Magnum P.I.
Oh, yeah.
The one with the mustache. Yeah. And
with the Ferrari.
Yeah. And also Beverly Hills Cop and Knight Rider.
I used to love that.
Yeah. I still listen to the music. The shows they did not stand the test of time, but I like the music somehow. So I listen to that a lot.
You know what's
especially
funny?
when I exercise. Yeah.
Well, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but when I was a young kid, I loved Knight Rider. And one of my biggest things I ever wanted to do, and my father did this for me, is he took me to Universal Studios in California, and they had the Knight Rider car there, and you could line up and go and sit in it. And there's a picture of me somewhere that my mom has in her photo albums of me just absolutely like over the moon sitting in this car. Yeah. And the car would talk to you and go, hello. And I'd be like, oh my God, it freaked me out. He goes, Yeah, and
Right.
I go, hi. He goes, what's your name? My name's Mark. And he's like, hi, Mark. I was like, the rest of the day, my father could have took me anywhere, and I wouldn't have complained at all. I was so happy after that, and I could have went anywhere, and I wouldn't have cared, because that to me was my big thing when I was young. I loved that car.
Yeah, that's cool. The other thing I'm just going to mention before we listen to Lonnie's is I also like stuff like Living Daylights by Aha, A View to a Kill, Duran Duran, and License to Kill by Gladys. And all those three are Bond themes. So somehow that still is with me. You know, James Bond was the shit. Back in the day, back in the mid 80s, I remember going to the video, what do you call it? Video renting?
Video store?
Video store, yeah.
Blockbuster.
And yeah, Swedish equivalent to Blockbuster. And I wasn't old enough to rent the films or movies, as you say. And we had this friend in our class. He was huge. It was like 190 centimeters, and we were like 12 years old. So we made him, he was going to try to rent the James Bond video. And unfortunately, he wasn't very bright. So he was supposed to say he was born in like 1974, and he counted the wrong way. So he went the other way. So I was born in 1982. And then you're too young for this one, little boy. And we didn't get to see the movies, but I still like the music. Well, what about you, Lonnie? Let's hear what crazy stuff you listen to.
You know, I listen to, I've mentioned it on the show before, but one of my guilty pleasures is I have way too much Bon Jovi on my phone.
That's not too bad.
I don't know. My wife gives me a hard time about it when I'm listening to it, and she's like, really? She's like, it really just doesn't seem like you. And not just the old Bon Jovi stuff, but like newer Bon Jovi from the 2000s too. See, there now it doesn't sound so good anymore. See, now it's a lot worse than it was. Like, like I'll listen to Bon Jovi from pretty late into their career, and it's pretty bad.
I think Bon Jovi nowadays is more like a Bruce Springsteen type of guy. I mean,
yeah, I think he wants to be Bruce Springsteen more than anything else. You know, he wants to own football teams and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So Bon Jovi's up there with me, and I really like these bands that I always liked from the 90s, I guess, because they resonate with you when you're young. Yeah. And bands that never really made it big, I still listen to them a lot. Like I listened to this band called, I don't know if you guys ever heard of Jackal. I really like them. You remember Jackal?
I do, with the chainsaw song.
Chainsaw, he's cutting up the bar stool and he throw it at the crowd. I still got a piece of a bar stool around here somewhere. We're moving. My wife's like, what is this? Like, oh no, you can't get rid of that. That's great stuff. Really? We're moving that? Yeah. So, like Jackal, and there's a band called Brother Kane. Do you know who they are? Oh, so well. I still listen to them quite a bit. Bands like that
popular.
Really, bands like Brother Kane was actually pretty popular for a little while. Their first album was actually
You're
pretty
in Canada.
Pretty mainstream. And I saw them at some clubs around here, and they came back in their second and third album. I really liked them, and I still do. So, and like, I guess, I remember, and I always liked bands like that in the 90s. Like my friends liked bands like Rage Against the Machine and stuff like that. And I didn't like that. I liked more of a classic rock sounding band like those other bands that I was just talking about. And now if I'm driving around and like Rage Against the Machine comes on, I'm like, you know what, that's really not so bad compared to like what's out there now. This is actually pretty good stuff in comparison. Like, I've actually gone back and bought some of that stuff that I was really against back in the day. And now
I was very anti that movement as well, because somehow it felt like it killed Kiss, Kiss released Revenge, nothing happened. Then you had like Alice in Chains, Nirvana, Stone Temple Pilots, Soundgarden. Now I like all of them. You always liked it. But they were the enemy. Back in the day, so I couldn't listen to them back then. But nowadays, and especially Stone Temple Pilots, I like a lot, and Velvet Revolver later. Yeah. Okay, I guess that's your guilty pleasures. But if you're going to listen to a podcast, then it can't be a Kiss podcast.
It can't be a Kiss
but
podcast.
Anything else? What do you listen to, Mark? Can you give us a few examples?
Well, mainly I listen to two types of podcasts. Musically, I listen to music in general, but I divide them into different things. Like I listen to there's one podcast I listen to called Recording Rock Stars, which is basically has nothing to do with musicians. It has to do with engineers. So it has to do with, they get people who engineered albums for like Dave Whitman, who recorded like a lot of Kiss records, for example. They have them on the shows and they talk about the different techniques that they used for recording albums, like what kind of microphones they used and these kind of like what kind of mixing boards and what do they remember about recording these records. And then they give you, there'll be episodes on like how to use the compressor properly or how to repair a 24-track reel-to-reel machine, like stuff like that. And these are the kind of things that I love listening to, right? Because I love recording my music. So these kind of things are very great to listen to as far as, learning the latest stuff too, because they also have like, updates on the latest plugins that come out and all kinds of technology for recording music. So I really love listening to those kind of podcasts. Another thing that I like listening to is they have a few podcasts, and the name of the one is really, I can't remember it at the minute right now, but I listen to a few podcasts that have to do with single engine aircraft flying, because I love like Cessna 182 airplanes and stuff like that. And they have like, these kind of different podcasts where they talk about, people who are learning to fly single engine airplanes. And they even have, funny enough, I found a podcast not long ago about people who use flight simulator games and talking about the complexity of flight simulating and how overboard, you would be surprised how some of these people, how much money they put into their flight simulator. They buy like 7 screens that surround them in their house. They have all the model replica sort of gears and the throttle units and everything. And one guy they showed in his house, his whole basement was reconstructed into almost a complete cockpit. So if you sit in there and you were to fly the game with him, the one guy said that he almost got nauseous because it felt like he was doing all the movements because of the screens in the room with him. It was unbelievable. Like, and I love that kind of stuff. I've never gotten that hardcore into it. I just have my single screen and my little one joystick, right? But I love flying planes. I mean, that's one thing on my bucket list to do when I'm a few years from now is I'm going to go for my private pilot license. I love single engine aircraft. And, I know that being a musician in a single engine aircraft is not the best combination, but I have faith in myself that I would never, put myself into a mountain or something like that. So, no John Denver music over here. So, but I those are the two things I really enjoy listening to.
That's cool. What about you, Lonnie?
I'm an old man, so I listen to all talk radio.
Oh, you're not that old. How old are you? 40?
I'm 40, but my wife.
You're younger than me.
My wife tells me like an old man. I don't listen to music in the car. I listen to podcasts. I listen to talk in the car. It's all I listen to. Outside of Kiss, I listen to a Star Wars podcast called Blast Point Podcast. It's pretty good, and they're Kiss, and to a tie-in, they're actually Kiss fans too. See, oh yeah, that's Return of the Jedi. So I listen to. They're actually Kiss fans too. So like they make some Kiss references in there from time to time, and a geek like me is listening to that's a Star Wars guy and a Kiss guy. Finds the humor in their inside jokes. So I listen to that, and then I listen to a lot of sports talk radio and a lot of sports talk podcasts. There's a radio show here that I listen to religiously called The Morning After, and it's 3 guys from St. Louis, and they talk, and it's supposed to be about sports, but it's not always about sports. It just turns into just grab ass type stuff and just busting balls type stuff, and it's funny and it's offensive at the same time. And if you just listen to it one time you wouldn't understand half of what's going on because it's a bunch of like Howard Stern type inside jokes type stuff.
Yeah.
You'd have to listen. Anybody I talk to about it, I say you got to listen to the show for 2 weeks, and then give me your assessment of it. But you have to go through 2 weeks of listening to it before you can even understand what's going on. So I listened to that like on my way to work, and then I listened to the rest of it on my way home from work because I won't miss a minute of the 3-hour show. I live in St. Louis, but I'm a big fan, as everybody can see, of the Cincinnati Bengals. So I listen to a lot of Cincinnati sports talk radio too. It's exciting as that sounds. That's what I do with my spare time. It's an exciting lifestyle that I lead.
Yeah, it doesn't sound so bad. But you listen to sports radio. What are your go-to sports then?
Well, obviously football is Cincinnati Bengals. I really love them. And then St. Louis, I'm a big Cardinals guy with baseball. And then my wife is more the hockey fan than I am. And when we started dating, she really turned me on to hockey. And obviously with what the Blues did in the spring, winning the Stanley Cup, it was pretty amazing. It's something I never thought I'd see in my lifetime. My dad called me. My dad called me when the Blues won the Stanley Cup, and he said, "I never thought I'd live the day when the Blues would win the Stanley Cup." So,
please.
No.
My dad's 73 years old, so I'm really glad that they were actually able to do it for him.
You have to wait long. You know how long we've been waiting here in Toronto for a cup?
But you have won the Stanley Cup.
Was it in the 60s?
You have won it before.
Last time was in the 60s,
Yeah.
I think?
It was in the 60s.
I think my dad was a young man when they won last time.
Yeah.
Holy smokes. But that's interesting though, Lonnie. I didn't realize that you were so much into talk radio. It's pretty popular over here as well. But the one thing I forgot to mention though that I'm huge into as well listening to is I listen to a lot of Doctor Who podcasts. I'm really into Doctor Who. I have a huge collection of that stuff. I got like 3 or 4 DVD shelves full of like every single episode that's been ever released of Doctor Who. I have the whole collection. Like all 300 episodes or 250 episodes. I have them all because I love Doctor Who.
Okay.
What about you, Daniel? What do you listen to?
Yeah.
Well, of course, I listen to a lot of Swedish podcasts. I don't know if I'll mention them, but I'll mention one of them. It's Fredrik Strage is the name of the guy, and he's a columnist for one of the biggest newspapers in Sweden. And he's like this music guy, very diverse when it comes to music. He collects old T-shirts, band T-shirts, and everything. And pretty recently, he wrote a great piece on Kiss and Kiss fans. That was kind of cool. It was called "Jag vill leva i en värld där Kiss-fans existerar," and that means I want to live in a world where there are Kiss fans. So it was kind of cool. It's like the biggest newspaper in Sweden. So and he was going to some small convention in Sweden just to see Gene Simmons's old Dragon Claw, from the Unmasked era, the dynasty it has. And he ended the article by saying, "You don't have to love Kiss in order to love their fans." I think it was kind of a cool thing, and he's just a cool guy all around. So I listen to that. But when it comes to American or international podcasts, I guess I listen a lot to the Joe Rogan podcast, mostly because he has such a eclectic, such a variety of guests. So you can always find someone who interests you, and everything from fighters to scientists to comics and everything in between. So I listen to that, and actually I also listen to Eddie Trunk. I know he catches a lot of flack, but I think he's done a lot for rock and roll and still do. He still does. I really enjoy the TMS show. I don't know if you watched that one, that metal show. I thought that was cool, kind of taking Jay Leno or Letterman and doing a rock and roll show.
I enjoyed that quite a bit.
I think it was really fun. He has a TV show now, but it's nowhere near TMS. But that was a cool one. So I listen to him from time to time. He talks a lot about himself at times, but I still enjoy his podcast. So that's what I listen to. But let's move on to the next topic. And the next topic is favorite Kiss fan. I mean, we are all Kiss fans, but in the past, I'm sure you guys have had one person or a few persons that have meant more to you than others. They have done something that you appreciate. And being one of these diehard fans is... I just watched this Kiss Loves You. You remember that old...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a fine line between being a cool, Kiss fanatic and a creepy one.
Yeah.
And you see both types in that film. So that got me thinking about Kiss fans and who I liked and whatever. And for me, it's this guy, the one who did these magazines. You might remember them. The Firehouse magazine.
Oh, yeah.
Because this was my main source of information, Kiss information, for a lot of years. They didn't write anything in the newspapers or in the magazines, an article here or there. But here you could get everything, and he put them out quite regularly as well. You got quite a few in a year, and I still flick through them from time to time. I think they're great. And also, this was in just before internet came, so I really enjoyed the letter spot at the end. Here you could read what Kiss fans thought. They wrote letters, and you could actually get your own letters in here. I had a few in these magazines, and he answered them. And yeah, I think it was like the KissFAQ message board of the day, back in the day, This is it, yeah. But then when Kiss Otaku or whatever it was called,
Otaku,
and Kiss Asylum, when those sites started, you didn't need this one as much as you did before. So, and then it disappeared. But I think it was called Ron Roxburgh or something. A Canadian he was.
Yeah.
So that's my all-time favorite Kiss fan. Lonnie, do you have anyone that you liked back in the day or still do?
Well, it's funny. My favorite Kiss fan is actually my friend Joe Odell, who I met. He lives in St. Louis. He's he's all over Facebook, and everybody knows who Joe Odell is. And I met him 20 years ago at a toy convention of all places. I was actually looking for Star Wars toys, going back to that. Mm-hmm. And Joe was there selling Kiss VHS bootleg tapes. And he had Detroit 75, he had San Francisco 75, had Houston 77, bunch of different stuff. And I was just like, and I'd never seen these things before.
No.
And it just like blew my mind. Like, oh my gosh, I have to have all of this.
All of them.
And like they would have these toy conventions like once every month, once every other month, something like that. And I go back like hoping he'd be set up again with a table. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So I could buy more Kiss stuff. So, and then obviously Joe and I became friends over the years, and he lives 10 or 15 minutes from me now. But he's a great guy, and he's a great collector, and his collection is amazing. What he has, it's just absolutely ridiculous. Like Daniel, like this, he has Paul's fuck shirt from the Revenge tour, and he bought at the auction back in 2000 when they did that. He has that shirt like framed up in his basement. It's like ripped to hell. Paul wore the hell out of that shirt, but it's really freaking cool.
Oh,
so not to be, but Joe's a great guy, and he's helped me out with a bunch of stuff over the years. We help each other out with different things, and not to be. I always give people trouble on this show about being lemmings and being, whatever Julian says goes. But I really enjoyed Julian's books, and I did a long time before I even joined the podcast. And when I joined the podcast, I was like, man, people like always tell me how much I know about Kiss is ridiculous, and I'm going to do this show with Julian. Like, what I know is like this much compared to what Julian knows about the band. And like, I was a little intimidated at first when I first started doing the show, because like Julian, like this guy's written books about Kiss, and I'm, who am I to this guy? So Julian's and I've been a member of the FAQ for ever. So, Julian has done a lot for my Kiss fandom as well. Not to really suck ass to him, but
Yes,
he really has.
Yeah, I think we all put Julian high on our lists. But Mark, do you have anything that you can tell us?
Definitely. Back in the day when I first started getting into podcasts, I had started, getting back into my love of Kiss, but it wasn't really too hardcore at that time. I had a few friends that listened to them, so they were always around in my listening. But I stumbled across a podcast really early in their infancy when they first started broadcasting. I think they were only on episode 5, I think it was. And that is Gary Schaller and Ken Mills, the podfather for the Kiss podcast. That podcast changed everything for me. Like, as soon as I started listening to that, and they started doing all these little segments like the Devereaux's, they had like this thing where they called like the Devereaux's dungeon or something like that, where they would go and listen to a really old demo they would pull out and they would play it. Like, they'd play like the isolated drum track of like an Animalized song that you could hear Eric Carr just play by himself. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. Where are they getting all this stuff from? And they would play like old bootlegs and stuff like that. And then they would do an album by album. Like, one episode was only on Animalized, one episode was only on Creatures of the Night, and it really refired up my love of Kiss. So Gary Schaller and Ken Mills have everything to do with me getting back into Kiss. I mean, by the time they did their special on Sonic Boom, I remember when they announced that Sonic Boom was coming out, the album, it was like pandemonium on that podcast. Everyone was so excited. It was going to be a new Kiss record, and everything was going crazy. People were, calling in and stuff, and people were ready. And then when the album came out, they gave their review about it, and stuff like that. So it really made me refire up my love of Kiss. So those two guys are highly responsible. And then, kind of like what happened with Lonnie, I stumbled upon all kinds of different Kiss things. And one of the things I stumbled upon was Julian Gill's books through Amazon. And I remember I bought one of his, I think it was the 2001 era period book that he had out at that time. And I bought it and I loved it. And then I stumbled across the FAQ message board because I saw there was like some kind of link at the back for it or something. And I noticed that they were doing podcasts. So I was, already at that point really deep with the podcast one. So I checked out their one, and Julian would always say, if somebody from the board wants to come on and try and do an episode with us, contact me. And I remember I contacted him, and he said, yeah, let's go on and you can come on and, try to see if you like it. And I remember the very first episode I did was the Dress to Kill episode. It was really early on. I think it was like 30 or something like that. And, I really enjoyed it. And I really have to thank Julian for that, because he really encouraged me to stick with it and to do it. And if it wasn't for him, I would never have had the balls to try doing some of the other ones like I did. Like, I do the Yes Music podcast. And that guy, Kevin, he's really hardcore. He's a British guy, and he's really very strict about his podcast. So at that point, I was kind of more experienced with doing the podcast because of you guys and with Julian and stuff like that, right? So, Julian was a big influence on me as far as Kiss. And you know what? Not to sound like an ass kisser as well, but you guys as well. I mean, you guys are probably some of my favorite Kiss people too. Like Lonnie, I met him at the Rock N Pod there the first year, and we had a great time. We went to dinner and chatted, and so Lonnie's become a really cool guy that's in my who I consider a friend now as well. And same with with you, Daniel. I mean, we've even gotten as far as I went into your school classroom there and did a little segment for your school classroom there. And so you guys have been a big influence on me too. So same with with Ken. I do a podcast with him. He's been a good friend as well. And Alex is a good friend that I talk to on here as well and stuff. So I mean, all you guys that we are involved with this, I would consider you guys my favorite Kiss people as well.
Well, thank you. I think it's kind of cool because it opens up a lot of doors being on a Kiss on a podcast. But I have to put you on the spot. If you could pick one of Julian's books, which one would it be, Lonnie?
The solo albums book is my favorite.
Yeah. Okay. And Mark?
Yeah. Solo albums is my favorite one as well.
Mine as well. Yeah, I think that's the best one. And we have to say about Julian, he's very good at encouraging people to, be a part of this podcast, and he never treats anyone bad and so on. So if you feel like being on the podcast, I think you can. I mean, and I think there's room for any kind of Kiss fan. I mean, you have the really knowledgeable guys like Julian, but you could, I'm more of a regular guy. I know a lot of Kiss, but not to the same extent as Julian. But I think it's interesting to have different kinds of Kiss fans. Maybe someone who just discovered the band would be cool. Someone who became a fan a few years ago. That would be interesting. So if you feel like it, just, message Julian, and I'm sure you'll be on the show if you want to. Because I met a lot of guys at the last concert I was at Trondheim, and I said, why don't you guys, you can be a part of it as well. No problem. But there seems to be, people are a bit, like you mentioned, Lonnie, they are a bit afraid of being
intimidated.
Intimidated. But I don't know why. But,
the door is always open for any member of the FAQ to jump on the podcast. That's why it was Daniel's idea, actually, and that's why it's why it came to be.
You invented it.
You did. It's for any member of the FAQ community can be on the podcast. It is not limited to just the regulars that are on this show.
Mm-hmm.
It's a place. And I would like to have more views, and I'd like to have like a ladies view on here. I'd like to have a female on here every now and then, just because it'd be a different perspective as a Kiss fan.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and we've tried to get more people on the show, but it seems that people are a bit intimidated. You don't have to be that. Okay, let's move on. I think this will be our final topic of how long have we been talking?
Or 51 minutes.
Yeah, that's perfect. Okay, so the last topic of today's episode is this one. From what I've learned, Kiss fans are a little bit of nerdy. I mean, a lot of Kiss fans are a bit nerdy, and not only in the Kiss area. I mean, they have other areas where they know a lot of stuff. And I would say a nerd is a interesting person to me. I mean, that's a person who knows a lot about stuff, not to be confused with a jerk or something. A nerd is a good person. And so I'm sure you guys have a few other things that you're really into and that you know way too much about. Who wants to start?
Well, I can go first, I guess, if you want. Well, there's the one thing that I've really been into since I was young, and now I'm extremely into now. And I know that every time I mention it, members of my family always put their hands to their head and go, I can't believe you still do this still, is that I'm really into wrestling. Like, I love watching.
It's
1980s, like 1980s wrestling. I can start mouthing stuff off about the 80s wrestling.
Yeah.
My brother never did the other day.
Like
the honky tonk man.
That.
I liked him. He did the shake, rattle, and roll.
Yeah.
The Undertaker.
But I like that era, but now I'm really into the New Japan Pro Wrestling. Like right now, they're in the middle of their G1 tournament right now. And honestly, this wrestling is completely different than the WWE. Like, the Japanese fans in general, we all know when it comes to like music, for example, are very different than North American and even European fans. They're very respectable. They don't make a lot of noise. They clap at certain times. And when it comes to wrestling, they're very much like that as well. Like whenever there's a high spot that happens and somebody does something crazy, they can drops on their head. That's the big whoa, when something happens. And they're really a place that wrestlers nowadays want to go and wrestle because of that kind of audience that's there now, right? Because people are getting really fed up with the whole entertainment WWE side of things. It's more like a soap opera for men, that kind of WWE wrestling, where this stuff is really back down to the sport now. And you got really crazy wrestlers, high flyers, like Will Ospreay. And you got like big, huge guys like Lance Archer. You have some fantastic Japanese wrestlers like Kazuchika Okada and these other guys. They're amazing. If you love wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling is fantastic, and it's available on YouTube everywhere. Like if you just put in New Japan Pro Wrestling, you have the zillion hours worth of different matches you can see and stuff in there, and it's just unbelievable. Like I'm surprised some of these people are actually alive, because I've seen people do like triple somersaults off the top of the ring through a table, and it's unbelievable some of the stuff that they do, and it's just something I've always loved since I was small, and it's continued with me now, and it's something I know way too much about, right? That and Doctor Who, but wrestling is more my thing that I am really nerdy about.
Yeah, some of those sports that are, I don't know if that qualifies as a sport, but some of the sports that are popular in North America, we just don't get over here. Like Lonnie, you liked American football.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know if it's too advanced because I don't get it, but that's at least better than baseball. How long does a baseball game take?
Too damn long.
It's
3.5 hours.
Too damn long, too damn slow. Nothing happens. I mean, that's the worst. And wrestling, I don't know about wrestling, but I like more the walk-ins in wrestling when they come in and look kind of cool. But the whole thing in the ring, I don't get it. But sports is also one of my big interests. But I'm into fighting, and especially heavyweight boxing. I know everything about, I'll just show you. These are the things I go through when I don't have a lot to do. Boxing literature, lots of it.
That's cool.
In English, so that's good for practice. So you can ask me anything about especially heavyweight boxing, and I'm sure I can tell you what it's all about. And I remember when I started getting interested in boxing, it was one boxer that stood out. I'm sure you can guess who it was.
Tyson?
Yes, of course.
Tyson.
It was Tyson.
Yeah,
Mike,
right in the age,
Iron Mike.
we're right in the age group when Tyson was huge.
Yeah.
All three.
Yeah.
And I still remember his first loss against Buster Douglas in 1990. I was shocked. Of course, we had a heavyweight champion from Sweden at one point in the late 50s. I wasn't born then, but Ingemar Johansson knocked out the American Floyd Patterson on his ass. Then Floyd knocked him out twice. So that's a big thing for me, and I also follow UFC. But heavyweight boxing is my main interest there. As you said, Mark, I know way too much about it.
Okay.
I don't know what to do with all the information I have.
Well, then let me ask you then. If you were, with all the knowledge that you have and with the amount of years that you've watched it, would you say that Iron Mike is the best heavyweight boxer in history? Yes or no?
No way in hell, actually. Okay. Unfortunately, the most, how do you say this in English? The most flamboyant, the most, to a person who doesn't know boxing, it looks damn cool. But every time Tyson met a great boxer, like a Lennox Lewis, Holyfield or Buster Douglas, he was knocked out, but he never fought Riddick Bowe, unfortunately. I think Riddick Bowe would have beaten him as well. And Riddick Bowe didn't fight Lennox Lewis either. So you had that's a thing with boxing. The best doesn't always get together and fight.
Match up.
UFC is much better at that. They have the best fight, the best. So, but that's enough about boxing. The other thing I'm into is movies, and not just watching movies. I've taken quite a few university courses on movies actually here in Sweden. Mostly analytical approaches, like studying, how do you say, dramaturgy, theme, symbolism, etc. And I've taught film in upper secondary school. I'm not sure what it's called in America. It's like the 12th grade or something.
Yeah. Seniors in high school.
Yeah. And it's always fun because you get groups of people who are really into movies. And nowadays they can watch movies, I mean, it's easy to get a hold of movies, so they know a lot. It's different when you teach literature or something. They haven't read a book, but movies is always interesting to discuss with the students. And this all started with this. Lonnie will like this. Watching Star Wars in 1983. I was blown away, and I've been a movie fan ever since. So, Lonnie.
Yeah, so I alluded to my two big interests outside of KISS earlier when we were talking about podcasts, and one of them is Star Wars. I listen to a Star Wars podcast weekly basis. I've seen, the movies way too many times. I've spent way too much money seeing the movies in theaters.
What do you think about the new ones?
I enjoy the new ones.
Yeah?
My favorite one of the new ones is Rogue One by far. I really enjoyed that because
Rogue One. It's so dark. It's not.
It's great.
It's not like Star Wars feel.
That's why it's great. It reminds me of Return of the Jedi because it is so dark.
Dark. Yeah.
That's why I like it. I guess. Return of the Jedi. It reminds me of Empire Strikes Back. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It reminds me of Empire, and that's why I like it so much because I love Empire Strikes Back because it's more focused on the Empire. And you have those cool scenes with Tarkin in it, and like I'm sitting there in the theater, and like the CGI of Grand Moff Tarkin comes on. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's incredible. Yeah. It looks like it was shot the day after A New Hope was shot. He looked so great. So I'm excited
just imagine what they can do in the future.
Oh, I know.
I mean, you can just pick Han Solo and Luke Skywalker and everything, and do films forever.
Yeah.
Have you seen those face shifter on YouTube where they put like what's the name? The one who plays the mask, Jim
Carrey.
Jim Carrey. They put Jim Carrey's face on Jack Nicholson in The Shining, and it's awesome. You have to look that up on YouTube, and that's the future. Sorry, Lonnie. Got carried away there.
I gotta ask you something about your fandom, though. Are you so deeply into Star Wars? Do you actually watch all those kind of like cartoon tie-in ones that are connected to them?
I don't watch. I've seen them. I don't watch them like over and over again, but I have seen the cartoons and that. I will say that I've waited outside of Toys R Us several times at midnight for the release of new Star Wars toys, so I can go in there and spend a fortune. I have done that on more than one occasion, more than two occasions have I waited outside of a Toys R Us for them to open at midnight for me to buy Star Wars toys.
Nice.
Yeah, it was a real problem for a while. So I've since moved past. I don't buy the toys anymore. I've moved on. I'm more mature now. And
the books, do you get that?
I don't know about that.
I've read several. I've read many of the books. And then they release new books that are like lead-ins to like the new movies that are like to Rise of Skywalker that's coming out. So I have to read that before the movie comes out, so I can know a little bit more backstory of what.
The board games. Do you play the board games?
I do have a Star Wars Monopoly. I do have a Star Wars Trivial Pursuit. And see, it's bad. It's not good. It's bad. I'm way too much. I'm not just like, oh yeah, I like Star Wars. I'm way too much into it than I should be. And I can rattle off names of characters that their names never appear in the films. Like, oh, that's Tessic there. That's Reese, and shit like that. It's not good. The stuff that I can start rattling off. Like if we play Star Wars Trivial Pursuit, you land on a card and. Where you answer one question. If Lonnie lands on thing, well, Lonnie has to answer every question on the card for him to be able to go again. It's bad. So more than I'm proud to admit. So the Star Wars thing's really big, and then I alluded to it also that I really, really love sports, and it's baseball. Sorry, Daniel, but baseball and American football. I really thrive on both of them. So, and my wife loves hockey, and she's really turned me on to hockey in the last 6-7 years that we've been together. So
I like your wife.
Yeah, so she's really into the hockey. So, between the three sports, there's not many nights that we don't have a game on TV between the three of us. So there's
cool.
always something on TV between one of the three sports. So
I've never met a girl who has been that into sports. You're a lucky guy.
Yeah. She doesn't bat an eye if I want to watch. There's always a game on. So I'm really lucky because, you know, a lot of, like my mom, for example, my dad just loves baseball, and he can tell you anything about the St. Louis Cardinals, and my mom could just give a crap about it. You know, it makes no difference to her if they win or lose. And she goes, no, I take that back. She goes, I do hope they win. She goes, because then your father's in a good mood if they win. If they lose, then he's in a crappy mood the rest of the night.
Yeah.
So, but as far as knowing, my mom and dad have been married almost 50 years. She doesn't know a thing about it. So I am very lucky how much that she's into it as much as I am. So those are my two things. And like my baseball memory is so ridiculous that I can tell you, like when something happened, like we were in the car the other day, and she's like, what year is that? I go, well, that was 1996. And she's like, how do you know that? Well, I know it was 1996 because the Cardinals were doing this at the time. Yeah. So I guarantee it's 1996. And she looks up on her phone. She's like, why do you know this?
But I think that's a good
anything
thing.
Back to baseball.
I mean, you can use your interest in sports to remember stuff. I mean, like from 73 to now, I have, you know, easy to remember stuff that happens because I just tie it together with the Kiss albums and Kiss tours. So it's a good way of sorting things in your head. So and I think that's a nerd is more often over average intelligent than below, I think, because
for sure.
You have to have some brains in order to remember all that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess that's about it.
Yeah.
So for Lonnie, Mark, and myself, thank you for joining us. Please do tell us a bit about yourselves in the comment section. It's always fun to read. Tell us about your guilty pleasures when it comes to music. What are you into besides Kiss? Any Kiss fans that you want to praise? What are your favorite podcasts? And what are your future hopes regarding Kiss? And also throw in a question or two that Julian can use when he talks to Toby Wright, the producer of Carnival of Souls. Så tack och godnatt. Och godnatt Amerika, var du än är.
Thank you for spending time listening to the KissFAQ podcast today. All sales are final. There are no refunds. If you'd like, look us up on Facebook or come over to the KissFAQ message board and discuss the topic we've broadcast today. Don't forget to rate us on iTunes, Spreaker, or wherever you've listened to the show. We hope you'll join us again.